Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to Think Out Loud with me. I'm Natalie Peterson, casting in from my little neck of the woods in northern Colorado to you in yours, wherever and whenever that might be. This digital adventure is an effort to turn years of internal chatter, wondering, silent suffering, and physical and mental close calls into enlightening and empowering conversations with others. Given how many choices you have to spend your time, I'm honored that you're listening in. I am by nature a very upbeat person. Those that know me will tell you I'm optimistic, and probably even folks who don't know me but can tell, I'm wired to see the good in people and situations. And I have a positive energy that can often give the Energizer Bunny a run for his money. In fact, this upbeat, we can do this outlook can be too much for some. My mom once remarked, actually, after having too much of my trying to reframe what to her was a hopeless situation. Well, we can't all have rainbows and unicorns falling out our assholes, Natalie. Ow. Wow. Okay. Next. This insistence that I'm living in a beautiful world full of amazingly beautiful people with beautiful opportunities for growth and love and connection certainly doesn't mean I haven't acted negatively or experienced struggle or extended periods of pretty serious doom and gloom. Being quick to give others the benefit of the doubt has gotten me upside down in several cases, and more times than I can count, I found myself in uncomfortable situations where no amount of positivity or rainbow glitter was going to do any good. I've had to learn to establish boundaries, recognize red flags, and keep a hand on the dial of my energy to avoid exhausting myself in the pursuit of good. Good stuff. I like good stuff. Good humor, good conversation, good vibes. The desire to find good in my life is what gets me up in the morning, makes me a better person, a partner, a mom, a good friend. I have to say, though, it's been tough lately to keep my chin up, especially since COVID, when it felt like something seriously shifted in the universe. I understand from my teachers and guides and sisters and brothers and healing circles that we are in a period of intense change in humanity. Look outside, look out online, look locally and nationally and globally. There's some serious shit going down. So keeping our shit together as individuals, as a community, as a collective across time zones, it's requiring us to dig deeper, have greater compassion and trust more than ever before. Hackers, kidnappers, war, a volatile situation brewing in our government, guns, drugs, attacks on character and planet on which we live, women's rights, humans' rights, and access to care, a safe place to sleep, food, education. The stress from uncertainty has many of us feeling drained, worried, or even hopeless. Navigating your way through the day and keeping it real when everywhere we look, we're tempted with loaded headlines and sound bites of reasons to run and hide is, well, it's hard. It's why I'm grateful to have connections like my guest today, someone with whom I can think out loud about hard questions and know I'm going to get honest perspective. Ariana Friedlander is an organizational anthropologist, a leadership development expert, and an author. She's the founder and principal of Rosabella Consulting, with over 20 years of experience in fostering positive change within organizations and companies of all shapes and sizes. Ariana made Northern Colorado's 40 under 40 list and has even received the 4th annual Quid Novi Award for Innovative Thought. She's a master facilitator, a certified conversational intelligence coach, a certified HeartMath mentor, and a trained breathwork practitioner. Ariana specializes in modeling shared leadership and navigating co-creating conversations that lead to innovations. She's adamant about walking her talk, which is why she wrote her first book, A Misfit Entrepreneur's Guide to Building a Business Your Way. Ariana earned her master's degree in organizational leadership from the University of Delaware. She's got a bachelor's degree in medical anthropology from Hampshire College in Amherst. And she's worked with dozens and dozens of clients here locally and even nationally. Ariana, it's wonderful to see you. It's wonderful to spend time with you. And I'm just really tickled that we get to do this together.
Likewise, Natalie, thanks so much for having me on today and for just this opportunity to think out loud with you. I love the premise of your podcast, and also really resonated with so much of what you said in your introduction as well, particularly being that person that people perceive as so positive and upbeat and optimistic. And that is, a way that I'm often perceived. And I've also received a lot of reinforcement that I am more welcome throughout my childhood. Happy, upbeat, positive, joyful Ariana is welcome here. But there are those shadow sides, there are those dark sides, and learning to allow myself to recognize those parts of me, to allow myself to feel them, and to learn that distinction between feeling the quote unquote negative stuff is different than feeling it too. Has all been a big part of my journey, and I'd say the last 6 years in particular.
I want to know more about your journey. You and I, we first met, I sat in your presentation at Founded in FOCO and met just what's becoming just an amazing group of mostly women, but a handful of men that I just am tickled to just be connected with. And you are very much a part of that. And then I've joined for a couple of workshops around the concept of keeping it real, which I want to talk more about. But first, I would love to know about this journey, more about you as a human, and what brought you into your expertise. Can you share a little bit about what got you to this point in the world?
Yeah, well, I can share a little bit because to share the whole thing, we would need a lot of time.
It's an all-day podcast,
especially because I can be so verbose. Access to words is one of my gifts. So yeah, I will say that in 2016, I experienced 3 separate events that culminated into a trauma response. And so if I had experienced any one of them individually, I don't know that I would have gone into a trauma response. But because there were 3 of them that happened consecutively, one of which triggered a childhood trauma, one of which triggered ancestral trauma, and one of which was a present trauma, like a present familial trauma. And all of those things just caused me to go into a tailspin. And I became unfamiliar to myself. It was really hard. I normally am the type of person that makes a plan, executes the plan. It might not go as planned, but I at least execute. And I found myself not executing. And it was bizarre because my business at that point was, I don't know, 4 years old. And I had reached a pinnacle of success that was really exciting, except I couldn't actually enjoy it. I found myself crying in my office, which I finally could afford to rent. But I was by myself in my office, just bawling my eyes out often. It was really hard for me to put myself out there. Every time I put myself out there, which is an essential part of being self-employed and being an entrepreneur, if I didn't receive positive responses, I felt like daggers in my heart. It was just heartbreaking. I felt like I had to be fake at networking events. It's you have to act like you're a success and fake it till you make it. And so I would go to these networking events, and people would just make these assumptions that they would exert onto me. And I felt like I had to just maintain them, even though they didn't feel true. And so that was just incredibly just draining and demoralizing. So hopefully I painted you the picture of this dark night of the soul that I endured. And that I really, it's funny you mentioned Misfit Entrepreneur's Guide, which I wrote with the community of co-creators, which is lovely. They made it great. If you like it, that's why. And there's an analogy in the Misfit Entrepreneur's Guide with a bike. So the journey of entrepreneurship that's what it's about. It's a journey of mastery. So you never arrive at being an all-knowing misfit entrepreneur. You just have to engage in these 3 practices. And the analogy is a bike. And so one of the practices is the rider, understanding yourself. Another practice is the bike, and that's understanding business. And then the third practice is the bike ride, and that's being on a meaningful journey.
Mm.
And so what I realized when I was in this dark place was that I had spent the first few years of my business doing everything I could to understand the bike and have a good bike ride. And I kind of like neglected the understanding myself part because I thought I just already knew myself well enough. I hadn't done any deep dives. And that's what I realized when I was in this place, feeling so distraught, feeling so disingenuous, inauthentic, like just not connected. I realized that I needed to embark on understanding myself, really deepening within and getting to the heart of what was causing this discontent that was rippling out of me, and making me feel so uncomfortable in this world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. I started just getting support, participating in some different programs, doing training. That's when I, came across HeartMath and started to do the HeartMath tools. And it's been a lot of work, and I've experienced that shift where it's not like everything's easy and great. In fact, I kind of am just at a place of accepting that stressful stuff happens,
Mm-hmm.
and it just keeps happening. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing I can control is how I respond to the stressful stuff.
Amen, sister. I understand the dark night of the soul. I had never heard of such a thing before I experienced it myself. And when I learned the concept, I thought, oh my gosh, that's where I was. And at the time, that's where I am. That it was like, okay, this is a pivotal moment in my life that I've come to honestly. I did, for me, it was around becoming sober, and realizing that my life was in a bit of shambles and that I was the common denominator in most of it, right? And then, gosh, Natalie, I've always gotten myself out of this where, I've positive thought my way out of this. And I'm not able to do it. And then thinking I love myself, but then realizing maybe I need to understand that more, and self-awareness becoming just the marching order. Like, who are you? I still don't know, but that realization, that turning point of going inward and starting to really understand and become aware of the facets that make me, when without anybody's input, right? And with people, with the Natalie, with all the input, the conditioning of culture and family and society and all of this going on. And then the Natalie, when you strip all of that away, which is hard to do, was a very, very significant undertaking, and spits you out the other end like, wow, I'm a different person now than I ever even imagined. The other part that I'm hearing is, and that I relate to, is that we think that we are going to arrive somewhere and be, all 100% something. I don't know what the 100% is, but that there is a destination, and that healing and self-awareness is just, it's not a final stop. You don't all of a sudden wake up and like, ta-da, I am self-aware. I am very aware of who I am. I learn every day. I will leave this conversation with new perspective about myself, and because of another human's input, right? And so, yeah, what a tremendous journey. And then to have the gift, what I've experienced of you is the gift to take that journey and turn it into fuel and magic for connecting with people, and for being able to communicate uh, how how we how we move through this life with greater ease and grace and compassion. And I was just noticing you posted this morning on LinkedIn. Uh, I'm just curious, thinking more about, finding ourselves in negative cycles and, same old ruts. Here I am again, a repetitive pattern that that I'm finding myself. Why do I get myself in this situation? I, mentioned being the common denominator in a few things. And what it means to notice versus feel.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, first I want to say that I realized 2 years ago, after enduring my treatment for breast cancer, that healing is synonymous with living. And it was so freeing to like reframe healing as like not a destination, but just part of the journey. And because it is ongoing, it's just like it never ends. And I think that's one of those things that, we can get stuck in those stories of once I this, once I heal that. And it's like, yeah, you heal one thing and then you find that there's another wound that needs tending, or a wound that's been opened that needs tending. So I think that's one of the things that comes to mind for me as you're talking. And about those repetitive cycles, there's actually a word in the dictionary for obscure sorrows, which if you haven't ever checked out, I highly recommend checking out. And I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this word because I do that even with words that are well known. Uh, but it's it's Altschmerz, which is kind of just, I'm tired of dealing with the same old problems over and over and over again. And that's definitely how I was feeling too, right? Like just in that, like, I'm so sick and tired of dealing with this challenge, this issue. Like, why does this keep having to be a problem for me? Why do I keep having to deal with this? And I think that, it's important in those moments to show ourselves a lot of compassion first and foremost. And that was one of the things that was essential in my own healing journey. I am an avid journaler. I've been journaling for years. And I think it was like in 2018, just randomly started writing to myself in the third person in my journal.
Mm.
And I was like, that's weird. I haven't done that before. Uh, and it was like a very compassionate response. And I started to, after a while, realize like I have a very cruel inner critic. Like I should talk myself all like so good at it. I deserve an A plus plus and being able to shit talk myself. Um, and so I realized, the way I was talking to myself wasn't helping because I would get frustrated feeling like I was in these loops and then I would dump on myself about dealing with the same old problem over and over again. And it would be evidence of how much I sucked as a person. And so I consciously and intentionally started to write from the voice of compassion in my journaling practice routinely because I realized I needed to create new neural pathways. I needed a new inner dialogue and to shift out of that shit talking inner critic and into the voice of compassion. So that really has helped me. And for me, like I start writing in my journal, the voice of compassion, I do like dot, 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 dot. And then she always starts with, oh, sweetie. And it's so much more validating when we feel so stuck to have that compassionate response that says, "Oh, sweetie, it makes sense that you're frustrated right now. You feel like you're spinning your wheels, and nobody enjoys spinning their wheels. And it's really important to just take a step back and show yourself some love and kindness because you're doing great. I know it doesn't feel that way right now. I know it doesn't feel good, and you're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Mm-hmm.
good enough. You're worthy of love and belonging as you are. You are good enough as you are."
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of takes that pressure off.
That's beautiful. It's almost a form of parenting yourself, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the parental response I always wanted, but didn't really get. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And places where we may have abandoned ourselves in situations in the past, where we didn't have the level, we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the perspective to be able to relate to ourselves in that way, and to be able, I mean, what a beautiful relationship to have with oneself, to be able to wrap your arms around yourself and hold yourself and say, oh, like, wow, it brings tears to my eyes to think about, yeah, just, I'm here. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going anywhere. Right. It's a beautiful thought to think of. And regardless of upbringing, I think the ability to be aware of emotions, well, I should back up. It very much matters. Our upbringing very much matters. It taught us how to, our first lessons in managing emotions, and the home environment in which we grew up taught us a load about how to manage our emotions, and frankly, just the basic definition of self-awareness. It wasn't even a thing in my home. It wasn't a thing. Self-awareness. I like, that's not a term we would have even used. Um, so to get there and to have such compassion for yourself, and that which we can give ourselves, we can give other people.
Mhm.
We can't give of ourselves. We can't give other people what we can't give ourselves. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think feeling stuck in a loop, I think that that's so common. And I think that what can also make it worse is anytime we're struggling, anytime we're suffering, anytime we're hurting, there seems to be a go-to perception of, why am I the only one suffering? Right?
Mm.
We feel so alone in our suffering, and that just makes it worse. And so when we can recognize that others struggle like me, that was a practice my therapist recommended I consider, as Tonglen. And so I think it's a Buddhist practice,
Mm.
where you recognize in your suffering that others are suffering like you, and you send love to others that are suffering like you, not to ease their suffering, like not to make it better or to make it go away, just to acknowledge it, to shine love on something that is so otherwise hard and dark and difficult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Because suffering is not going anywhere. It's not. It is, right? A part of our lives. And so, yeah, I totally hear you. Um, and then touching into the heart math realm, the concept that of sending love, there's a very distinct difference between in feeling compassion. There's a vibration associated with it, and and that vibration being very different when you have compassion and send love to someone, not to solve, but to sit and to support, versus feeling sorry for, or a lesser degree, a lesser tone or vibrational, pull around pity.
Mhm.
And that when we feed into this vibration, this HeartMath global vibration, that in fact, not only are we helping ourselves and uplifting ourselves, but we are in fact helping others lift themselves up. Tell me more about HeartMath in your world.
Yeah. So it is amazing that we now can get insight into understanding, the role the heart plays in regulating our whole nervous system and our brain. And that there's a theory that some people know called polyvagal theory that asserts that the vagus nerve actually carries more information to the brain than vice versa, and that coming from the gut and the heart. We know more about the heart than the gut brain at this point, although there's a lot of research being done there. And what we do know about the heart, first of all, the heart beats before the brain in our head is even developed, right? Like it's the first organ that's developed and that
Yes.
beats. And so just kind of is, pausing to wonder, well, how does the heart know how to do that? Right. And so it's that notion of the heart brain and the role the heart brain plays in regulating us. And there's a network of neural bundles there. So it's not looking like the brain in our head, but it has the neural network in place.
Mm-hmm.
And we can actually measure our heart's coherence. So when our hearts are coherent, it's measured by our heart rate variability. So that's the variation between heartbeats. And so when our hearts are coherent, our heart rate variability is like a smooth wave, up and down and up and down. And when we're coherent, we reach high coherence. Our brain is fully engaged. Our bodies are working together optimally. I like to kind of compare the heart to like a master conductor. And so when the heart's coherent, like the orchestra just sounds beautiful and is in sync and in tune and playing in the same tempo and everything. And they're just like, they're nailing it. And so it's effortless to listen. Whereas when we're incoherent, the heart rate variability is very jagged. So it's like up, down, like up, 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 down, 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 like not this smooth wave like line. And it also creates a lot of stress in our bodies and our organs and how we're operating. And the thalamus takes the executive functioning offline as well when our hearts are incoherent. And so it's like having a drunk conductor where the orchestra is not playing in sync. They're not playing in tune. They might not even be playing the same piece. And it's very stressful to listen to. And so it just creates a high stress state in our bodies. And so I started doing HeartMath. I think that was like in 2019, 5 years ago now. And there's biofeedback devices you can get. There's actually, since I started, there's one that you can download as an app for free. And it actually can read your heart rate variability by placing your finger over your camera on your
Wow.
phone, which is just amazing. And so it's really helpful to get that biofeedback. It helped me realize that again, going into that like positive, upbeat person, I didn't realize that my baseline for operating in the world was anxious until I started using the HeartMath tools. And part of it was that as I was using them, I was checking in with like, oh, how do I feel? How do I feel? And I was, anxious, 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 anxious every morning. And so it helped me recognize that I had this like kind of baseline of being anxious, of waiting for the other shoe to drop, of anticipating the worst in a way that I have no control over. Just all of these habits of how I was showing up that were draining and depleting and exhausting and demanding and counterproductive. And so the more I stepped into that practice and was able to create greater coherence within my heart and my body and my mind, the more peaceful I felt, the more at ease I felt, the more access I had to even these radical feelings that I really struggled to embrace, like joy. Because, joy was scary for me. before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been a really powerful journey to be on and to get that biofeedback, especially because there were times, and this was the other reason I could tell I had a baseline of being anxious, because there were times where I would be like meditating and I'd go, I have to be in high coherence. Now I feel great. And I'd
Right.
look down and it'd be incoherent. And it made me just aware of how comfortable I was, right? So like my sense of what felt good was based on what was familiar and comfortable to me,
Mm,
and not based on what actually was healthy and like positive and uplifting and rejuvenating for my body and my spirit.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. I have this notion because I run in circles with the likes of you, with the likes of healer, and this has just been in the past several years where I've dove headfirst into really a healing journey. I have this notion that everyone is self-aware in some form, and that we're all regulating and like feeling into these emotions like, oh, this is uncomfortable, and we're all working on our conversations with others and communications with others. The fact of the matter is, it's not that big of a group, and I would say that the majority of folks on the planet, would you agree, are not self-aware?
I mean, I don't know that I can answer that one. I would say that I think that our level of self-awareness is a direct result of the circumstances that we're in. And so if self-awareness has been something that has aided us, I think that, and we've been supported in, and we've received non-judgmental responses to that self-awareness, I think it's that skill is more developed. Whereas I think we have a lot of situations where maybe self-awareness is like there's reprimand for,
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of judgment around. I also think there's a false sense, like there's a lot of false sense of what it means to be self-aware out there. And so, one of the ways self-awareness was modeled for me as a child was it's just the way I am. I can't help it. And I don't think that's true self-awareness. That's scapegoating.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying I can't help the fact that I, use an aggressive tone of voice. It's just how my voice comes out. It's just how I talk. You just have to deal with it. That's not self-awareness. That's making an excuse for behavior that is unacceptable,
Mm-hmm.
inappropriate, and hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that also again like goes with the circumstances, right?
Yeah.
So like we might perceive ourselves as having a level of self-awareness that enabled us to survive in the circumstances we found ourselves in, but
Mm-hmm.
didn't necessarily translate into a deeper level of self-awareness, which is that ability to recognize the shift that
Mm-hmm.
occurs within us
Mm-hmm.
when we experiencing something that's triggering and upsetting and causing us to shift out of a more rational and empathetic place to a more self-centered space.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a different kind of self-awareness, or the ability even to recognize our thoughts, right? To like, and that's why I'm such a fan of journaling personally, is that it gives you a chance to like write down that inner dialogue on paper, and when you look at it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't always feel good to look at it, and that's normal. Right? Like if you're like, I don't want to write my thoughts down, they'll scare me. Well, it's like, yes, and you'll have an ability to shift them if you actually are aware of them. But I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we just don't even recognize that we're interpreting our thoughts as facts and believing that our thoughts are reality when it isn't necessarily the truth. It's just a perception of the truth.
Yep. I love your brain.
Thanks.
I do. I want to nod and say yes, 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 yes. It's perception. I was business partners for a blip, probably part of my own kind of trauma response of and slide into a dark night of the soul. And his thing was, he was a very, very significant stature, just a very large man, tall, just an enormous human being. And he would say that it's your if you're intimidated, that's on you.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to gaslight you.
Yes. Oh, like, and I was just aware of gaslighting when this was, and yeah, exactly. It was like, so the fact that you're standing over me and that I feel like you're about to stomp on me is my problem. It's not,
Yeah.
you have zero responsibility in this situation whatsoever.
Yeah. And I think,
Right.
again, that's like circumstances too, right? Like, I'm just going to make a wild assumption that this was a white male. And so, like, yes, I think white men, their circumstances have reinforced that it is acceptable for them to be intimidating. And
Mhm.
they have no responsibility for intimidating others, because that is a perfectly acceptable way for them to show up as white men in this world.
Mhm.
And so that circumstance gets reinforced, that kind of posturing gets reinforced. And I think, that is a key component of self-awareness, is that we are relational. We as humans, we strive for connection, we strive for belonging. We need that. We're like
Mhm.
we're like wolves. And in my household, we call the limbic system of the brain, which is the system that is evaluating, like, do I fit in, don't I fit in, do I belong? We call that the wolf pack brain,
Mm.
because it's, we're constantly wondering, do I have my pack? And if
Yep.
not, the limbic system is like, alarms,
Yep. Yep.
and so that's, I think, part of that self-awareness is recognizing that, like, we are relational beings, we're relational creatures, and how we show up is impacting other people. And it can be really, really hard and uncomfortable to acknowledge when we're showing up in a way that is causing harm to somebody else, especially when we feel justified in how we're
Mhm.
showing up for whatever reason. But we have to. Like,
Mhm.
we have to sit with that discomfort and ultimately dance in shame, because that, I think that's my theory, at least, is that resistance, that knee jerk, oh, well, if you're intimidated, that's on you, is because to acknowledge that his behavior was intimidating would mean to face a part of himself that experiences a deep level of shame that he has rejected his whole life.
Yes.
So, and I know from personal experience, I mean, there are things that I learned through my childhood. I grew up in a family where there was one parent that was extremely passive aggressive and one parent that was extremely conflict seeking.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting combination. And so I learned how to, like, jab from my conflict seeking parent, right? Like, I knew how to go for the jugular.
Mm.
And, to be in a partnership, my husband and I have been together 22 years now. I mean, we haven't been married that long, but we've been together almost 22 years. And it's been hard to hear him give me the feedback that there have been things that I've said, or the way I speak, or the tone of voice I use has really hurt him and cut him down. And, when we were earlier on in our relationship and those things would come up, it was common for me to double down
Mm. Mm.
and just, well, like, I'm not responsible for your feelings, right? Like, mimicking the things that I heard in
Yep.
my household. Um, but I realized that my relationship was more important than my pride.
Mm. And that he's worth it.
He's worth it because that's part of what I love about our relationship and have always loved about us together as a partnership, is that we're constantly open to growing together
Mm-hmm.
and individually.
Mm-hmm.
And that feedback and that consideration is mutual.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And your kids are watching that.
yes, yeah.
So yeah, they're soaking that in, and 20 years from now, they will. Oh, they'll
Fingers crossed.
remember. Yeah, they'll
Yep.
remember. Are you familiar with 6 Seconds? The globe. It's a global nonprofit that is kind of the keeper of emotional intelligence, education, awareness, what have you. So they just released in the last few days a state of the heart report, and you can take it's an emotional intelligence survey, and that survey over the years feeds into their data, and they take data and track out, all sorts of different measurements. And they so emotional intelligence being, the baseline of emotional intelligence is self-awareness,
Yeah.
and first and foremost. And so people taking this survey are coming into it wondering how emotionally we all think that we're not all, I speak in these general terms. A lot of us think, I know what I'm feeling, I know what I'm intelligent about my emotions, and then come to find out we actually aren't. So anyways, my point is this state of the heart report just came out, and it's showing that the data since COVID is actually we're far enough out from the pandemic that we're seeing the data speaking to us, and that we are in what they're calling a global emotional recession.
Yeah, I believe that. I see that with clients all the time right now. Tell me more.
I'm curious about your own take on it. It's for the positive in us,
Yeah.
like we're looking for the good, it to sit with that reality, that women are trending down. So if we bucket it into, let's just call it well-being, that well-being is trending down consistently over the course of the last 4 years for women. For men, it's even deeper.
Mm.
And then by generation, that the baby boomers doing much better on one end. On the opposite end, Gen Z struggling, heartbreakingly so.
And this is the global emotional deficit. And what does that mean? I just want to make sure, like, I know I'm like, oh, yes.
Right,
And I
right.
might have a different perception than what they mean. So I'd love to hear
So
that.
so if we're an economic recession, is that we're not producing output, right? So an emotional recession is that we're not putting in energy, that there is a downshift in energetic play, energetic input, and that emotional intelligence, all the facets of emotional intelligence, everything from knowing your purpose and having a noble cause, empathy, there's just a rainbow of different things, that everything is shifted down. And their goal as an organization is emotional intelligence worldwide, to lift, right, the quotient,
Love it.
and that we've got a lot of work to do.
It sounds like it.
I want to stay hopeful. I want to
Yeah.
think that the you and me and those the circle that we run in, we're up for the challenge. Back to what I opened with, some days it's not easy.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And maybe we need a collective dark night of the soul. I don't know. Right. That's one of the wonderings I have. I definitely am seeing this in my work, though. I mean, so many of my clients that I'm working with are in that emotional deficit place.
Yeah.
And in HeartMath, the definition for resilience is the capacity to prepare for and recover in the face of adversity, setbacks,
Mm-hmm.
challenges. And
Mm-hmm.
it's that capacity piece that is key to recognize, because, it's just like if you've ever been in a situation where something small just like throws you for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
You're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, normally this kind of comment or this problem wouldn't bother me. I would just roll with it.
Yep.
But I suddenly do not have that capacity, right? It's because the capacity is missing. I'm freaking out about something minor because I don't have that capacity. And so I do think that that's an important thing that we need to be addressing is our capacity, and taking it back to self-awareness. I like have a little bit of a soapbox on this topic. Um, and that is that I think one of the reasons that we struggle with self-awareness in our society in particular is because we've been taught not to trust ourselves. That's been really reinforced. A lot of, especially probably our generation, from our parents, right? Like, oh, you're fine. Don't make a big deal about that, right? Like being told that our emotional reaction isn't appropriate, telling us not to trust ourselves. That's the underlying message. And then same also with like relying on assessments and teachers and things like that to give us insight about ourselves. And it's one of the reasons in my work, I do not rely on the prototypical assessments, personality typing, all of that, because it feels akin to like spiritual bypassing. Like it's like self-awareness bypassing when we rely on Myers-Briggs or the DISC assessment or this or that to tell us who we are. We're not actually like doing the hard work of being observers of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And separating our impression of ourselves, our thoughts of ourselves, our feelings of ourselves from just the awareness of like being able to notice factually, like a scientist. Oh, when I am in these types of situations, I freeze.
Mm-hmm.
When
Mm-hmm.
I am in another type of situation, the teeth come out, right? Like so I think that that's also part of it, is like we don't trust ourselves. We're taught not to trust ourselves. That's reinforced by our education system in so many ways. There's pockets in our system that I think have shifted in that way, but I don't think that that's happened at a grand scale. And so we don't know how to even be self-aware because we were told not to feel the feelings we have, or that our feelings aren't legitimate, or that our intuition's wrong. That was years ago. I was working on an initiative that was a little political, and I had a mentor who's since passed away. He was amazing. I was so lucky to have him because it was such a political situation, and there was like a lot of egos involved that were, very like needed to be the loudest people in the room, needed to be
Mm-hmm.
the ones calling the shots and all of these things. And he would just constantly repeat to me when I'd be processing things with him, Ariana, you have a good intuition. Trust your intuition.
Wow.
Trust your intuition. And I really needed that at that point in time because I didn't have that message reinforced
Mm-hmm.
enough for me. And so my go-to was to second guess my intuition because I was taught to second guess my intuition,
Mm-hmm.
usually because it would maybe make somebody else uncomfortable or
Mm-hmm.
feel bad or cause them stress.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You mentioned working with clients, and I want to just give you an opportunity to, I would love if if this is resonating with somebody out there, to be able to reach out. What
Yeah.
type of client, who's your client? How do they work with you?
Yeah. So I work with professionals, leaders that are heart-centered. So have that connection to care for others, empathy for others, wanting to promote well-being, recognizing we're whole people. And
Mm,
so we show up at work, we bring our whole selves to work, even when we try to compartmentalize. And we also likewise bring our whole selves home. And so it's a two-way street where work stress can impact our home life. And so, a lot of the leaders and professionals I work with recognize that. And sometimes that's where they're at, where it's like this work stress is impacting their home life. And they're like, I'm done. I can't have this stress causing my personal relationships to be on the rocks. And so there are times where I get brought in to coach. So I'll work with clients that are as a coach. And a lot of times they're in that place similar to where I was, you know, in 2016, 2017, of like being unfamiliar to yourself, not reacting the way you normally would react in a situation, like kind of feeling like a little bit unhinged, out of control of your emotions, just like explosive or shutting down or something like that, that you're just like, oh my gosh, this is not who I am, but I can't seem to stop it. I kind of feel stuck in this, and I'm worried it's going to be career limiting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so those are a lot of the coaching clients that I'll work with one-on-one, and really just like creating that safe space to just be able to explore these things, bring in the different tools that meet the client where they're at, and co-create solutions with my clients as well, because I'm creating that pathway for their intuition to come forward, their inner genius to come forward and guide them. And so I remember a few years ago, I was working with a client. She was in that kind of situation where she had there's one personal trauma and one professional trauma that happened at the same time.
Wow.
And because of those situations, it like tapped her. She experienced an emotional deficit, and she kept exploding on her boss. She just kept yelling at her boss. And she was a super specialized type of professional. It was, there's not a ton of people in the country that do the type of work she does. So the organization really wanted to keep her. They didn't want to replace her. It was going to be really hard to replace her with someone that had the same skills she had. And she wanted to stay. Losing her job meant uprooting her family and moving. Mm-hmm. Because it's not like there's another job like that right here. Especially this was pre-COVID when remote work wasn't as big of a thing.
Yeah.
And so, I worked with her to process through that and really support her, and was going over some ideas with her. And she goes, I know where you're going with this, Ariana. You want me to make a note of every time I experience a trigger and what it is and how I feel. And it was not at all where I was going. I was like, actually, that's brilliant. Do you want to do that? She was like, yeah, that'll be so helpful. I'm so glad you thought of that. And I was like, I didn't, you did. So that kind of gives you a little bit of that like idea of my style in the way I work with people. And then I also work with teams. Like really my specialty is making hard conversations easy for people. Mm-hmm. And so anytime a team, it can be within an organization, it could be interdepartmental. Sometimes I've also worked with like collaborative partnerships across different organizations where there's just like things that need to get expressed and processed and worked through, and you don't even know where to start or how, or you're stuck in your patterns, or you just also might need that like objective outsider that will like create an even playing field, because there's a power dynamics inherent within organizations where if the leader is facilitating, people are going to, the halo effect, the bandwagon effect can go into affect how people are showing up. So I love to play in those spaces. And oftentimes those kinds of scenarios are occurring because maybe there's a leadership change. So there's a shift in like how things are being done because of this leadership transition. Other change management that could be happening, and conflicts that could be occurring overtly. And also sometimes it's just a matter of like, we are burnt out.
Yep.
I've been working with some more clients in that space now where it's like, we can't continue to operate in the way we've been operating, and yet we still need to fulfill our obligations. How do we do that?
Yep.
So it's just like kind of combination of healing, troubleshooting, strategizing, and really harnessing that collective wisdom of the room to find a path forward, because you need everyone's unique experience and training to inform where you're going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it takes it's talent that you have to play that role. I need you to hear me saying you're very good at what you do. Just the the little bit of experience that I've had of you tells me that you are you're a force, and I love knowing you. I do, and I say that genuinely. I think, being able to recognize when you're sitting at a table, being able to play in a role that sees what all is going on and then communicate about it, not participate in it, but be a mediator of it so that you can come to common ground, that you can come to people feeling whole, that you can come to productivity and efficiency and well-being and all of the things that make us tick. It's awesome. So, and I like your style. So
Thank you.
thank you for sharing it with me. And I want folks, you are very active on LinkedIn, and I thoroughly enjoy your posts there. They're very thoughtful and thorough, and rosabellaconsulting.com is where folks can connect directly and send you a note, contact you. And I just want to thank you for co-creating this conversation with me. It's enjoyable and to be around you and to experience your mind at work. And so I appreciate you spending time with me. It's a precious thing that we have, that we invest on the daily in things that we do. And so I appreciate that you would invest it in me. So,
well, thank you, Natalie. I appreciate this opportunity. I learned some stuff for sure that I have some notes to follow up for myself with later. And definitely, my goal was for this conversation to be energizing. And for me, I definitely am feeling very uplifted, and I'm grateful for you to create that opportunity for me to engage in this conversation with you and have it be something that is a rejuvenating activity on my to-do list today.
Aw, well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, folks, for listening in. Once again, thank you for choosing to think out loud with me and my guest, Ariana Friedlander. Until we visit again, go live with intention. And please, 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 please don't let anyone fuck with your flow. Big hugs, big love. Bye, friends.